for Teresa of Avila,
Mm.
there was no choice but to submit to her spiritual directors. It was the time of the Spanish Inquisition, early 16th century in Spain. And Teresa of Avila had Jewish roots, very obvious Jewish roots. She was first generation conversa from a Jewish family that was forced to convert by the Inquisition. Although she was a devout Christian and a deep lover of Christ, she nevertheless had a Jewish family. And her Jewishness actually was very obvious to me as I was translating her for all kinds of reasons, one of which, the main one I'd say, is her inclination to question everything, including authority. And so that did get her in lots of trouble because she, as a nun, had a vow of obedience. And there are many, many things that happened as a result of that vow of obedience that are gifts to us all. Actually, I'm realizing as I say it, the many convents that she and monasteries that she founded. I mean, a lot of that was her idea because she initiated a radical reform movement in the church that was an effort to return the Carmelite order to its original desert roots, really, of contemplative life, of solitude, stillness, voluntary simplicity. And also her confessors ordered her to write her books. And so the book of my life, which is her spiritual autobiography, one of the treasures of mystical literature, because it really documents the coming of age of a mystic. And her masterwork, The Interior Castle, were both commanded by her confessors. Originally, the book of my life, her autobiography, was written in her 40s when she was having all of these unconventional mystical experiences that were quite public to her dismay, or at least she pretended that it was to her dismay. She would go into these raptures and ecstasies. She had visions, voices, very distinct voices called locutions. All of these metaphysical phenomena, these supernatural phenomena were unfolding at a rapid pace and in very dramatic ways in her 40s, after many years, by the way, of spiritual aridity. And so the Inquisition, of course, was investigating her to determine whether these supernatural phenomena were a result of gifts from God, which is what Teresa was claiming, or tricks of the devil, the spirit of evil, insidiously trying to disguise itself as something holy, or finally as evidence of mental illness. But the thing about it is that Teresa herself, I think again that comes to her kind of Jewish family conditioning of questioning everything, was completely dedicated to inquiring about these spiritual experiences herself. She subjected all of them to that laser of her very fine mind and her dedication to that inquiry process, and determined in each case that these experiences were authentic. And her main criterion was, do they expand my heart with greater love for the beloved? And they did. And so she knew that with unshakable certainty that they were gifts from God. So the thing about her autobiography that I love, the book of my life, is that she is addressing her confessors who ordered her to write this thing. This wasn't a book that she was writing. She was documenting her experiences. And she had to go back to early childhood to speak of her earliest spiritual experiences and her family, all of that I find so juicy. And she's got such a great sense of humor and this sort of wry self-deprecation I actually minimized a bit, I have to admit, in my translations, because her self-deprecation really became a little overwhelming, especially to a contemporary audience, and especially to women, as she calls herself a worthless worm on multiple occasions, for instance. But she's doing that so she can accuse herself before she is accused. By the way, again, as you pointed out, Anil, it's political as much as anything spiritual. But she alternately addresses the men for whom she's writing this document as father and my son. And they're the same guys. The same guys. And I think that's because what's happening is during the course of her investigation by the Inquisition is that they're falling in love with her, which was one of the great gifts of Teresa's life, and also she considered to be one of her greatest burdens and her opportunity for sin, as she spoke of it, is this desire she had for everyone to like her, and how skillfully she managed to manipulate everyone into liking her. And so the inquisitors became her chelas, her disciples, her students, and her admirers. And so she alternately addresses them as authority figures and as beloved mentees, if you will, to her great spiritual mastery. But she also warns us, and she says things like, God save us from sour-faced saints. And those are the dudes she was referring to, who took themselves very seriously. And another one that I love, I don't remember exactly the quote, but it's something like, I have had a great deal of experience with men of learning who have taught me much and greatly benefited my soul. I have also had a great deal of experience with half-learned men who have done me no end of harm.
Yeah, I remember that quote. I was actually rereading some of her work in preparation for our meeting this morning, and I'm a big fan of Teresa of Avila as well. But and I was thinking, just to reflect a little bit more, that her great dexterity is building up this mental prayer kind of paradigm, which is, if you look on the face of it, there's nothing more subversive than what goes on behind closed eyelids, right? I mean, what's going on in your head. I can see oodles of men from the Inquisition going, oh, this doesn't smell good. Oh, this is, and somehow she manages, through her charm and her skills, to say, it's okay. It's okay. This actually, not only is it not a threat, it's actually of great benefit. And so that kind of turning on the head that she manages to do is I think one of her greatest strengths. And I wonder if you have any comments about her emphasis on mental prayer, particularly for a group of contemplatives such as the ones we have at SDI.
You're so insightful, Anil. I could talk to you forever. I mean, to talk about my beloved Teresa of Avila with people who get it is just such a joy. Yes. First, I'd like to address the subversive element of Teresa's teachings on prayer. And she is, in fact, a doctor of the church precisely because of her contribution to contemplative theology by virtue of these teachings on what she called mental prayer, what we might call contemplative prayer, or even simply contemplative practice. And the reason it was so subversive at the time, of course, is that Teresa was inviting people to completely bypass the established channels of the patriarchy and not ask permission of the authority figures in order to have a relationship with the divine, a direct relationship with God, which of course is the true meaning of mysticism, a direct connection with the sacred, personal, independent of any mediated forms that we're generally required to engage in through our various religious traditions. So that was scary stuff. that there was this woman who already in her lifetime had a tremendous amount of power. She had many people who looked to her for guidance and was considered to be a saint in her own lifetime, which she pretended she didn't want to be, but I think she really enjoyed. Because she was human and she was an extrovert. Not that introverts don't also enjoy being adored. However, she really fed on people's love in a really, I think, in a really beautiful way. But anyway, so the authorities did not appreciate that her message was, all you have to do, my daughters, my children, she was often speaking to her nuns, to be with your beloved is to turn inward. And not only that, the other subversive element to this model of the interior castle, her vision of the soul as this beautiful, radiant place, the most beautiful place in all of creation, so beautiful that the Holy One would not want to dwell anywhere else but inside the center of our own souls, is that defied the whole kind of original sin concept, that we are these flawed, sinful, messed up beings, creatures who are not worthy. It was the opposite. She saw each one of us as this overflowing, magnificent garden where the Holy One takes delight. And so those two things, not having to ask permission to turn inward to be with the beloved, and the recognition of our souls as places of boundless beauty, were both deeply threatening messages to the Inquisition and deeply liberating messages to all the beings who received that message, those teachings. Now, in terms of the contribution, one of the main contributions that I see, I haven't read this in the literature, but this is what I have gleaned from Teresa of Avila in terms of cultivating contemplative life, is that she says, of course your mind is going to be busy thinking 1,000 things. She said, to stop the mind from thinking thoughts in contemplative prayer is like trying to stop the stars from hurtling across the heavens. It's not going to work. We don't have that power. Of course, we've heard that in various mindfulness circles as well. Let the mind do its thing. You know, those thoughts are like clouds in the clear blue sky of consciousness. They come, they go. But that's not simply what Teresa was saying. It was not a recapitulation of some kind of mindfulness teachings 500 years ago. What she says that I think is so spectacular to contemplatives is, when you sit down to be with your beloved, now you don't have to be theistic to get something from this, you are doing the most important thing. You're saying, here I am, friend. This is our time together. She says, what's happening on the periphery of the castle, that is in our headspace, the mind thinking many thoughts and the witness part of the mind trying to get quiet, that grappling, what I call the jihad, to borrow such an important and misunderstood concept from Islam, that striving, that struggle to get ourselves aligned with the sacred. That is good and holy work. So let the mind be on the periphery of the castle, grappling with 1,000 difficult things, she says, because the real thing is happening deep inside your soul, which is that you have made time to be with your beloved. And that's what matters. And that changes everything.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you.
You gain merit from the struggle that's happening on the periphery. So don't worry about it. It's good work.
Yeah. No, that's beautiful. It actually makes you've already answered my next question, which is I know you're writing a book about female mystics, and my next question was the relevance of Teresa of Avila to the challenges continue to threaten and overwhelm women to this day in 2017. And I think there's a lot of what you said and a lot of what she says, which kind of helps establish a roadmap. So she can be continues to be a spiritual companion to generations of women and men to this day.
Teresa feels perennially relevant to me and to everyone that I share her with. There's something about her teachings that continues to be so alive and so perfectly suited to our times, particularly the challenges that we face as women in the spiritual arena. And by the way, that is not limited to the Roman Catholic tradition, what my Catholic husband, Catholic by birth anyway, calls the Catholic corporation. We see it in Buddhism, we see it in Hinduism, we see it in Judaism, Christianity, Islam. We see it across the board because it's like, my friend Jamal Rahman, the Imam, says that all of the world's great revelations are true and pure when they come. And then he says, he's quoting a hadith, I think. He says, then the devil comes in and says, here, let me organize that for you. And as soon as that impulse to institutionalize the purity of these sacred revelations, I hope that's not too theistic, is acted upon, then we put the truth in a box and we kill it. We kill the Holy One. And I know this is not a fresh new idea. The Tao Te Ching, the opening lines of the Tao Te Ching are, the Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. So, and yet it's very natural to try to contain the mystery. So the thing about teachings like Teresa of Avila's is that they're constantly challenging us to burn up the very containers that we're conditioned to build, and to allow, actually maybe not burn them ourselves, but to allow the radiance of divine love to do it for us. But that means living in a perpetually ambiguous space, and so it's very uncomfortable. So Teresa of Avila was certainly challenging the existing patriarchal system, but at the same time, she wasn't doing so for the sake of revolution. She had a deep, deep devotion, in her case, to Christ, who she spoke of as her beloved. And that was at the ground of everything she was doing. So she wasn't simply a revolutionary, she was a devotee of her beloved. She was, everything came back to her relationship with the Holy One, who she alternately speaks of as the friend and the beloved. Teresa of Avila was fierce. She was brave. She was smart and funny. She used her power to get what she wanted, but what she wanted was liberation for everyone. She, after her many spiritual experiences, once she had navigated her way to the center of her own being, the 7 dwellings of the interior castle that she identified in her vision, and attained union with the beloved, her only task left, she says, was to return and be of service in the world. That's what happens after you taste union, is you naturally pour yourself out in offering to the world, because you have that certainty that you are connected and that that everything is connected. And so the only thing you can possibly do is step up to to the call. And Teresa really teaches us that by modeling that. The other part of that is that when she did have that experience of integration, all of the phenomena fell away. She stopped having visions and voices and raptures and ecstasies. And she got on with the practical tasks of her reform and of creating these spaces for people to engage in contemplative life. So I find that very interesting for those who get really attached to their supernatural experiences. Teresa says, go peel some potatoes, sweep the courtyard, and be of service.